Hey everyone, welcome in, welcome in. Um, you guys will see we have some special guests up here. Shay is driving, so she's gonna be muted for a little bit. Tess is here. MJ will be coming in here soon. I know she was finishing up her live. But can you guys hear me okay? I want to make sure that you guys are hearing everything before I start. I didn't even try with my mic tonight because I just wasn't even gonna go for it. Oh, thank you, Debbie. I appreciate it. I made it myself. Welcome everyone coming in. Hi, hi, hi. So, the Maura Murray case is a case that I have followed since it really happened. But it got brought up somewhere and I ended up talking to MJ about it. And then we were talking to Tess about it. And then Tess, you were actually the one, weren't you? That started everything because you wrote in MJ's chat about the new podcast that had come out. So that was kind of what sparked it. Is I had listened to the new podcast, which was produced by Sarah Turney, who is the sister of Alyssa Turney, if you guys don't know that case. But it is all done by Julie Murray, which is Maura's older sister. So Tess is the one that kind of put that out to me. MJ, I'm going to bring you on. Hi.
Hi.
So, yeah, Tess was the one that brought out the new part to me, or the new one. You're good, Tess. And then I listened to it, and I'll say it was something that I think I immediately after listening to it went to Melissa and I was like, holy shit, not only is this good, but the final episode, which is what we're going to end up talking about on Melissa's channel in part 2, goes into the effect that true crime and social media have had on their family personally. So like just the trauma that they have been put through and sensationalizing and the rumor mill and just a lot of how it has affected them as a family, especially because it was the first very publicized missing persons case since the internet became a thing. It was pretty much like the first thing to be shared on the internet as a mainstream missing persons case.
They even said that there wasn't really a true crime community the way that there is now. And there's so many questions that people have, valid questions, great questions that they would have loved to even have back then to think of. Like, they didn't even think of this, they didn't even think of that, because there wasn't a true crime community the way that we have now.
Right. Well, and it was just the beginning of the internet at this time as well. So not only is it people are learning the internet, but they are also learning, hey, someone's missing. I can reach out to this person. I can reach out to that person. In the beginning parts of this, it goes on a lot about how AOL Instant Messenger was a huge part of how Maura communicated with people, especially when she left for college and everything like that. So, but yeah, it's an important case, and because the family also talks out about how the coverage of Maura's case has impacted them, as well as what they believe is what would be the word? Conscientious, is that the word? Approach towards true crime, covering true crime, and everything like that. So not only is Maura still a missing person, she still till this day has not been found. There are a lot of things that have come out from her being a missing person that I think people within the true crime realm could really, really benefit from. So, so the way that this is kind of going to work is that I have made a presentation. Shout out to Theresa over at Criminality. She was the one who kind of taught me how to use those. but I made a presentation. It's just more kind of cliff notes, and then I have my notes next to me. So I'm kind of just going to go through it with you guys. On my channel here for part 1, we're going to get up to from the time Maura was born till the day technically before her disappearance, and then the disappearance as well as the aftermath and everything like that will be covered on Melissa Jade's channel on Thursday at 7. It's 7, right? 7 p.m. is what time we said. My time?
Yes.
So
Sorry,
8 your time.
Eastern, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
yes. Okay, 8 Eastern, 7 Central. Melissa's channel on Thursday will be part 2, where we actually get into the in-depth information regarding her actual disappearance. So if you guys are new to my channel, because obviously when there are collabs, there's a lot of people that will come over that have never been here before. I try to focus a lot on the victim and like hopefully I don't know how to explain it, like focusing a lot, allowing you guys to get to know the victim, because I think if everyone in the chat has the ability to get to know Maura as a person, it gives you guys the ability to make a more genuine connection, and it takes away the aspect of this just being a case and turning more into a way that we can try and help find Maura or bring answers to her and her family. Do I think that a true crime creator could do that? Not necessarily. But I also don't think getting her story out there in a factual way and getting her face out there, getting the facts out there, couldn't potentially hit the right person. It only takes one person. So,
well, that's what I loved also about the podcast, and thank you so much, Tess, for telling us about that, is that it really humanized Maura.
yep.
And not that we didn't always know that she was a human, but we do become desensitized to cases, and it allowed me to understand Maura, because I followed Maura's case for a very long time, like when I first stumbled into the true crime and I'm looking at all this, but I have a so much better understanding and really see it through her family's perspective and who she was, down to the little things her and her sister would say to each other that I could relate to. And it really was just it was a very well done podcast.
Yes.
It's really awesome to me that you're doing it this way, because that's what her sister's advocating for. That's
Yep.
what her family is asking, to for all of us, the creators, the viewers, to look at these cases as people, these families as victims, and just so awesome. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something that I try to do not only with Maura's case here, but also just in general. Oh, Lori, thank you so much. Thank you for gifting memberships. I appreciate that. Little tidbit there. For memberships, I pay for StreamYard, I pay for Canva, everything else my members will choose, and we donate each month. So just to let you know, if you do buy a membership, get a membership, get gifted a membership, the money towards that, we end up donating whatever is additional at the end of the month. And we do a members only live for everyone to be able to choose where to donate to. So just for anyone that may be new.
That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I would get way too stressed if I tried to do it more. Like now it's just a passion of mine. For those of you that don't know, and I was actually just talking to MJ about this. I don't like bringing it up, but I do have 4 college degrees, including a master's in forensic psychology. So this is something that I am passionate about, to the point where I have the school loans to prove it. So it's just literally a passion of mine, and that is why I do it. I don't do it to make money. So if you do, right on you. Don't care, but just for me personally. So back to Maura's case. I am going to be kind of getting into the nitty-gritty timeline that was really brought up on the podcast by Maura's sister, Julie, starting all the way back. One of the reasons that I go so in depth with this, that I think it's so important, is because we don't know what happened to Maura. And not only do we not know, but with the different options of what potentially could have happened, the background of Maura, the background of how she got to where she is, to the instances that have happened in the years prior to her disappearance, I think could play a major role in potentially finding answers in what could have happened on the day that she goes missing. What do you guys think about that?
I completely agree. I think it was really critical to be able to hear her backstory, where she came from, the job she's had, the relationships she's had, the dynamics between the family, to really get a good understanding of what you think may have occurred. Because it's easy just looking at the scene without the context of who the person is and jump to, oh, I think X, Y, and Z happened. But unless you have the context, I think it plays a major role.
Yeah.
And also the psychology behind maybe why she was doing what she was doing. Yep. And why she felt that way as a perfectionist, having all of these things happen. And, I think it all matters.
Yeah, I agree. So let's see. I suppose we should just get started then. Now, once again, I said I got my presentation idea from Theresa on Criminality, but I created it, but this is my first one. So you guys are going to see it zooming in when it's not supposed to, clicking on the wrong thing and having to go back. So I'm just telling you guys that ahead of time because it looks good, but I'm still a little bit learning how to kind of maneuver around in it, if that makes sense.
I've never even heard of Prezi until you shared this with me.
Yeah, well, so when Theresa made one for the Delphi case, and it has a ton of different templates. So she had one where she had all of the different individuals in the Delphi case, and then you could like click on their name and it would bring you to a separate page telling you all about that specific person, why they were important, and what they said. And like you could do like, it's literally like not only is it you can click on different things and move different things around, but you also can share it. So like I just share the link to this at the end, and anyone that's in the chat has the ability to go and click around and look at the different things on this.
That's awesome.
So it was really fun. It's one of those things though where there's so much to it and so many options that it's almost like too confusing. So it's like, oh, I can do this, but I could also move this and do it 3 different ways. So, but so far so good. Yes. All right. So as you guys can see here, this is just going to be more of a overview. Yes, K-Brace. But we're going to start up here with the picture of young Maura, as well as getting into her childhood as well. So we have her background here. Maura Murray was born May 4th, 1982 in Brockton, Massachusetts. That one is Massachusetts.
I can't say that word.
Massachusetts?
Literally. Yeah, I cannot.
It's the accent, I'm sure.
No, I just can't say it.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Oh, so now I think I can hit the next button and it should just bring me back down. Okay, good.
Oh, how cool.
What?
It's so cool.
I know, but then you can also like hit this. No, not that. This. And it brings you right back out, and then you can just potentially click on that. I know, I love it. Okay.
That's incredible. Wow.
It's so cool. So like I said, Maura was born May 4th, 1982, which is another reason why we are doing this now. Her birthday was just this past Saturday. And they do also still do like runs in her honor. Maura was a big runner. We will get into that. Oh, hi, Liv. Oh, hi. Sorry. That threw me. That's my best friend's little sister, and I was like, what? So, back to where I was. She was a big runner, and each year they do runs and different things like that in her honor. But like I said, this is still technically an open case, so you guys will be seeing on the bottom scrolling. If anyone does happen to come across this and does have any info, the New Hampshire State Police Cold Case Unit, their phone number is right there underneath, scrolling across the bottom of the screen. So if you do have any info on Maura's case, please feel free to reach out to them. So I'm going to kind of go over the, hang on, let me see, the key players in Maura growing up. So Maura's parents are Fred and Lokomai Murray. So let's see, I have all my notes written down. I gotta make sure. Okay. So their parents grew up in how do you say this? Weymouth. Do you know how to say that?
No.
15 miles south of Boston, for anyone in that area. Her dad was a star athlete, and he was also a self-taught tennis instructor. Her mom was very self-spoken, beautiful, and she was a nurse. Not so much. Okay. Lori was 5 years younger than Fred. They got married in 1968 and had Freddie Jr. shortly after. Fred actually ended up working in nuclear medicine, and Lori did end up becoming a nurse. After Freddie was born, which is Maura's oldest brother, Lori was not able to get pregnant again until suddenly they had 3 girls back to back, which would then be Julie, Kathleen, and then Maura. Now I'll say between Maura and Freddie, he was, I want to say 12 when she was born. So there was a very big age gap between the two. And in the podcast that he is interviewed, and he goes in to kind of talk about, as well as Julie does, talking about the difference in his relationship with Maura having such a big age difference. And obviously the rest of the sisters as well. But he does kind of go into the differences, and it is very interesting to be able to see how he viewed things and everything like that. So, nuclear medicine is a division of radiology. Thank you. It just sounds smart to me, so. So let's see. They grew up in Hanson, Massachusetts, which is 25 miles south of Boston. Julie does go on, because like I said, Julie is the narrator of this podcast, which is Maura's sister. But she goes on to kind of talk about their childhood and how there's nothing to do in Hanson. It was a lot of them, having to create their own entertainment, going and there being like one road in town and just different things like that. So, and then, here's a little more info. My brain works a lot faster than my mouth. So if you guys hear me stutter or go back, that is why. So, Julie and Maura actually shared a room growing up. So Julie is the one narrating, and then obviously Maura is missing. But they shared a room growing up. They had their heroes on the wall, which is Joan Benoit Samuelson, who in the picture they had was that person winning the 1984 Olympic marathon. Hi, Heatherlicious. Hi, Abby. And they also had a small bookshelf with a collection of America's Civil War books and some classics like The Call of the Wild. And then they also both really loved history. Julie remembered how Maura would sit on the floor next to the bookshelf and twirl her hair as she was reading. And then Julie also said it was something that she did whenever she was very intently, trying to focus on things. Now, growing up as well, there was something known as the Murray athletic gene. Almost every one of the children was extremely athletic.
They said Maura participated in nearly every sport.
Yep. Yeah.
And she was good at all of them too, which is not very
Yes.
common.
Yep. I want to say I had it.
I think her sister set the records at their high school for track, and Maura beat all of them but one, and that was the mile by 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then the competitive basketball, which allowed her to travel all over New England as a teenager. So it definitely ran in the genes.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, and then if you think of like her dad, he was an athlete, and then he was a self-taught tennis instructor and was the type where he was everywhere. Like he went to all of the sporting events and stuff. But going back to kind of Maura as a child, so Maura, all of her siblings were kind of describing her in the podcast. So I'm just going to kind of give a handful of the adjectives that they gave when explaining who Maura was growing up. They said she had quick, witty comebacks. Mm-hmm. So she's not going to give in if someone is, mean to her or trying to get at her. She's going to come right back to you with the best comeback that everyone's like, oh, like impressive. She was sassy, but she did have a sense of humor from her mother. She had her drive and competitiveness from her father, but she was humble, thoughtful, kind. She was the type of person that would write a thank you note for the smallest gesture. But she also wasn't good at taking compliments. She didn't like to get attention, and she was very quiet until you got to know her. So at the age of when Maura was 6, Fred and Lori did end up getting divorced. It was very hard on the kids. But because their mom would work nights, the dad was often the one, doing the carpool to the sports and doing all of that. And then also their grandmother, Ruth, was a big part of their lives. She was their main babysitter. And it was like to the point where even when Maura had gotten her license, going to visit her Nana was like one of the number one things that she loved to do. And she would do it as often as she could. They often say that their Nana was the thread that sewed their family together. So, but she was also very close with her cousins, her aunts. They spent a lot of time at a specific aunt's house with their cousins. So it was a very close family related, like they were very, very close family growing up, regardless of this divorce as well. So.
I think her nickname her mom gave her was so cute.
Yeah.
Maza.
Yep.
With no meaning behind it, as far as her sister Julie knew. But
so
look at that.
Because the pictures are from older,
they're a
little blurry, but it still looks good. So I believe. So there's also a stepbrother in this. They have a stepbrother named Curtis, who is a few years younger than Maura. Okay, so they all go through a bunch of different stories about their memories, their favorite memories with Maura. When it came to Curtis was saying like Maura was always focused on being the best big sister that she could be for him. Always helping him, teaching him things. He said one of his favorite memories with Maura was walking over to a local golf course and then just collecting all of the golf balls at like midnight, like late at night. But that he was the one, because her older sisters were a little older, that she would kind of take around as her adventure partner and stuff like that. So, let's see, I'm gonna go back if you guys can see. One thing that the family did like to do a lot was camping. So this is Maura on the left, Fred in the middle, and then I want to say that's Julie, but I'm not 100% sure.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that once the divorce happened that Fred would want to do to kind of spend time with the family, because also as well, they were not rich in any sense. So he was trying to find something that he could do with the family that was inexpensive. So they would go camping a lot. There was a specific place in the White Mountains of New Hampshire that they really enjoyed camping and hiking. He said it was only like $2 a day to camp there or to rent the spot or however that would work. And it was something that they all just grew up doing, to the point where like hiking was something that they all had a passion for. So let's see. The interesting part about this, though, is that which will connect into more that we go into on Melissa's live, but the camp or the campground that they would go to growing up is actually very close to where her car ends up being found when she goes missing. So that was just a little interesting tidbit of that. So like I said, the hiking was a big thing. The father had set a goal to climb all 48 of New England's 4,000-foot peaks. And as the kids got older, they said, we want to join you. So they kind of started doing it. Dad was also an avid runner, had completed about 9 marathons. Let me go back. And let's see. Want to make sure I have all of the info. All right. So we're going to zoom in. Here's a picture of young Maura once again. And then we kind of got into this as the girls were just saying. Of course, now, even though I wrote my notes out perfectly, doesn't, work in my favor ever. So
that's how it always goes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. So, in high school, Maura was a big runner, obviously. She was on both cross country and track, as well as all the other sports that the girls had said. Do you guys have anything else you want to add into that? She played soccer, softball, basketball, but running was in her blood, and it was kind of the thing that she wanted to focus on the most.
Which she got a scholarship for.
Correct, yes. So
yep.
She also took another thing about Maura is that she took a lot of advanced placement courses. She tutored other students. She was in the National Honor Society, the Latin Club. She scored a 1420 on her SATs, which is near perfect. And she was a Boston Globe Scholastic, which I don't know much about that. Do any of you guys know the information behind that? Like,
Shay might.
I would not. I am not from Boston.
I don't know. It sounded school related. You know all the school stuff.
It had something to do with school and sports and being very at the top tier of that.
Maybe it's kind of like that who's who in sports thing that they have in Minnesota, Mal. Like where if you're a good athlete and good in sports, you can get special things.
Yeah, I'm gonna Google it.
I Googled it.
Oh, go ahead.
It's like the Boston Globe, I think, is a publication newspaper company. So I would think she would have been nominated for it, right?
I don't think I got the right thing.
Right, our Minnesota paper has that, and they pick different kids or whatever from different courses or different schools that do good.
Yeah, it's people within sports that are honored as also being good in their schoolwork.
Gotcha.
But it was not something that was easy to get into or anything like that.
She was a very high achiever.
Yes. So Julie gets accepted. Julie is her older sister. She ends up getting accepted into the United States Military Academy at West Point. A point to that is that Maura would visit Julie often at West Point. And it was about 4.5 hours from their home in Hanson. So, like Shay had said earlier, Maura had graduated high school with almost every record the school had. She actually ended up graduating 4th overall in her class, and she was receiving letters from all of the top tier schools to try and recruit her.
I believe that West Point is like a 2% acceptance rate. So that
Right.
is crazy. So
and she technically wasn't getting letters from them yet, but she was getting letters of recruitment from Harvard, Yale, Brown, like big name schools like that. But she does end up following her sister to West Point. She was awarded a congressional nomination from the late Senator Ted Kennedy, and she goes to West Point for college. So this is kind of where we're going to get into stuff that starts to kind of paint a picture towards the disappearance time frame. At least I would say. Let me see.
Well,
here we go.
And I think it's important to know kind of how she was like in high school and going up into school, because she definitely seemingly seemed to have some behavioral changes or just a different like pattern, in what I think she was like in high school.
Absolutely. And then even just, we will see, which we will talk about here, the differences just from her time getting to West Point to when she actually ends up leaving West Point. So Maura was set to be West Point class of 2004. Julie, her sister, was West Point class of 2002. Maura ended up, once she got there, becoming part of their running teams, made a name for herself. Julie and Maura were both on cross country and track. Some of the friends of Maura's at West Point were interviewed in the podcast, and they go on to say that in college, she was very quiet. She has the most noticeable, cutest dimples, is something that a lot of people brought up.
Yeah.
And but that she was also very funny, very goofy, cool personality. A lot of them thought of like Maura as like their safe place, where like when she was around, you just felt comfortable. And so she was also quirky and had a very strong work ethic, was kind of how she was described at this point in her life. So this is when we start to see kind of the first instances of different behavior, I should say. I'm wondering, can one of my mods, or even just really anyone, just throw a trigger warning into chat? We are going to be talking about eating disorders here. And at the end of the live, as well as in the description, there are resources for anyone. If you or anyone you love are struggling with an eating disorder, I will be putting an overlay up at the end of the thing here with phone numbers and resources, as well as it being linked down below in the description.
Can I say one thing really quick?
Go right ahead.
I think she was kind of a, that adage, she was a big fish in a small pond, and then kind of moving, she became a smaller fish in a bigger pond. And I think that in being a perfectionist, a lot of that is hard to control, and that's where all the things you're going to talk about come into. She was trying to control something.
Yeah, and especially I think with her time at West Point, the way that it is described is, I mean, it is a military academy. So I think the way they described it is, everyone dresses the same. Everyone, you have to do this. You can't have this in your room. You can't do this. Everyone is, neat and orderly and following the same thing and wearing the same things and following the same really strict rules. And so one of the things that is said is, yes, very high standards. But one of the things that is said is that, like, that was you, Tess, right? Because I'm not on my StreamYard that just said that. right?
That was Tess. Yeah. I was
Okay.
just going to add
Yeah.
one thing. I wanted to add one thing. Sorry, before you went too far forward, is
You're fine.
the eating disorder is not speculation. It comes from her family.
Yep.
So just want to throw that out there.
Yep.
I tried to post the phone number, but I guess it didn't go through.
Oh.
Probably because you.
I don't know.
It'll be in the description.
Yeah. My bad.
Not your fault.
So like I said, trigger warning. This is when we hear of the first signs of Maura, at this point, potentially fighting herself with an eating disorder. Like Tess was saying, according to Julie, her sister, she believed that during this time, Maura was struggling with not having a lot of control of what she was doing. So that goes a lot along with what Tess said, is that going into this military academy, you're literally, here's what you have to do. Here's when you have to wake up. Here's what your room has to look like. Here's what you get to wear. So an eating disorder is something that she had control over at that time. So it was actually Julie, her sister, first learned of Maura's disordered eating while at a track meet in Florida while they shared a room. She had overheard it in the bathroom, but even nowadays, it's a taboo subject to bring up. When it shouldn't be. I get it, but it shouldn't be. And it was one of those things where even Julie was like, we both just didn't talk about it very much. Like, I knew about it. I didn't think it was as, there was just a lot of different things where it's like, she's a private person. I don't like, how did you guys take away kind of how once people started seeing
I don't think we talked about stuff like that back then like we do now. I just think that we kept it all to ourselves. It was
this
like
would have been in
you were embarrassed
99 to 2000.
Right.
So,
right.
What about you guys?
What's the question?
What are your thoughts on the process of talking to Maura about her disordered eating when people were finding out? So, for example, Julie found out when they were traveling to a track meet in Florida because she overheard it, but it wasn't something that she really ever brought up, that they didn't really talk about at that time.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say this is like 1999 to 2000 at this point.
I don't think it would have. Okay, see, that's hard. I don't want to say I don't think it would have ultimately made a difference in the long run. I think that you sit there and you torture yourself with the coulda, shoulda, wouldas, like what if I handled it this way? What if I addressed it? And you'll drive yourself crazy like that. There's no perfect way to handle things like that. Because I try to ask myself, well, what would be a perfect response? I don't know. It really depends on the person, and it really depends on what they'll be perceptive and open to. But it was just like you said, it was a different time, and that's not an excuse versus it's just reality. It was a different time. Yeah. Things were not handled the same. Things were not as openly with awareness and resources. And I think that they did their best at the time that it was, with those circumstances, not being able to foreshadow, right, what would come in the future.
I agree. Yeah, I wonder almost as to like what potentially at that point could have been done. So I can't even really look back because at that time I was 5. So
right.
It was definitely like in a social cultural, it was a thing, and I wouldn't say it's accepted, but there was a desire of less curves more skinny. And I'm not saying that's what Maura wanted, but I think there was some kind of, like more celebrity type stuff happening around then with similar disorders.
It's like the Kate Moss era,
But you know what? Like, and I know I'll probably touch upon it. I'm sure their family seems not super judgmental and open and with what Kathleen was struggling with. And I'm not sure at what point Kathleen started struggling, but it seemed like they were there for one another the best that they could. But with something like that, there were more resources at that point, maybe than something like an eating disorder. But it seemed like they were as supportive as they could be at the time that it was.
Okay. Yeah. That's kind of how I was getting it too. And kind of, because even just her friends had also knew about it, but it was just the way that the friends kind of described it was just something that we never talked about. You don't talk about it.
And I've been through that with people too when I was younger. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think, and like as we go through more of it, the reason, I mean, you're probably wondering, why did this even come up? And it's going to come up that she was buying large sums of food and people just had questions about it. And it doesn't make it right, but I think that's why it probably got addressed when maybe it, and it also humanizes her. Nobody's perfect. Everybody struggles.
Well, I mean, and just like we started this with, right? Something that when we get to her actual day of her disappearance or the days leading up to, something that may stand out as, ooh, that's strange, right? I'm gonna really lean into that. If you don't have context with, may seem more strange, but if you have the context to it, may seem less strange. So it's really good to have all of this leading up. And even during the podcast that was touched upon of, you need to have this information, things that even the police, while investigating, nobody is going to understand certain things like we do because we're her family and we know her and we know the meaning behind certain things.
Well, it drove some of the rumors that I know the family wasn't too fond of. Yeah.
Well, not only that, but you also have to take into account the aspect that the potential of Maura needing to be in control of something as a potential for future choices. You know what I mean?
Correct.
So, all right. So that's going to kind of pause that eating disorder talk. Like I said, I will be sharing stuff. The resources are also down there.
And can I just say before you transition to the next topic, I actually love that all of us up on here on panel have not discussed with one another what our thoughts really are, what our theories are. So everything that we're going to be getting into, I love that. I have no idea what each of the guests thinks about this, where they stand on that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, you guys I sent them this presentation so they know my talking points. But other than that, it's more just we all have watched and looked into Maura's case for so long that we're like, let's bring it up. Why not? Like, it's been it's 20 years now.
Over 21 years, I think, right?
Yeah. Missing in
2004. So
2004.
It was 20 years in February.
Yep.
So it was right when I was graduating, I remember.
Don't make me do math.
I was in 4th grade. I got lucky and my grades matched the year. So 2004, I was in 4th grade. 2005, I was in 5th grade.
Oh, you are lucky.
I know.
I can barely remember my age. I have to think of my husband's first and subtract by 4, which he's actually around. He was born the same year as Maura. I noticed 82.
So over 20 years. Wow.
Yeah. Which is crazy because I even think back to just hearing 2004, and even though I'm like, I was in 4th grade, like I'm like 2004 wasn't that long ago. Like,
yeah, I think that was like a few years ago. No,
right? It's kind of the same as like now when people are like 2014 or something like that, and I'm like, oh, that was just like 2 years ago, and they're like, no, that was 10 years ago. I'm like, holy shit. So the next bullet point that you guys see here is the incident at Fort Knox. So this is going to be one, I guess, technically the first red flags would have been the signs of the eating disorders. The next is the incident at Fort Knox, which is something that gets talked about, but not necessarily super surrounding of it. I like the actual incident itself mixed with the aftermath and everything like that. I don't think it's talked about as much, but we'll get into it. So the next summer, which would have been the year after her freshman year going into sophomore year, if I'm correct. Because I believe she transfers her sophomore year. So yeah. Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So it is the summer after her freshman year. Maura was in something called Camp Buckner, which is like a more advanced training at West Point. And it included a 1-week trip to Fort Knox to teach cadets about armor and tanks. So one day on this trip is when this incident occurs. Maura had gone into the Post Exchange, which is kind of like a Walmart on the base at Fort Knox, that type of store. And she had gone in with a friend, and Maura ended up stealing makeup and walking out of the store. I believe in the podcast they said it was like under $5 worth of makeup. It was like one eyeliner. And the friend that she was with didn't even notice her take it, didn't even notice her having it. But as they were walking out of the store, the security of the store walked up to her and was like, they kind of, I don't know exactly what they said to her, but something along the lines of like, you need to come with us. We know that you shoplifted. And she immediately fesses up. She doesn't try and beat around the bush or anything. She says, yes, I did. I'm so sorry. And like, that's the incident. So it's literally, there's been a lot of questions regarding this incident because it was under $5, but not only that, but she had the money to buy the makeup. So it's not like she was broke and needed to steal it for that reason. And also West Point has, they're given a stipend. So, both her and her friend had their stipend from West Point that they had the ability to also spend. They kept asking her why she did it. She said, I don't know. And it was kind of the type of thing where they literally walked up to her and she was just like, I did it, and went with them. And her friend just kind of sat there and was like, did what? What the hell just happened? Like, she didn't even realize what had happened until after the fact.
And what I find interesting, and they went over it in the podcast, and I know we'll wrap back around to it when we get to the day of her disappearance and stuff, but something to note of the Maura's dad, the sister Julie explained that their dad never yelled at them, even when they got in trouble, to the point where the sister said, I almost wish you did, like, because you're kind of like left to internalize things, and the face of disappointment, even though you're not yelling, was big. And I just thought it's good to know, kind of like, just as far as, well, what were the dynamics, it seemed like they have a very, even though parents were separated and divorced, it seemed like they have very close family, very functional, very normal, like together. Like Mallory said, not, rich, but they were good, like, not that it seemed like with the dad and what he was expressing, not to stress the small things. Anytime something kind of happened, he took the glass half full approach of, well, it could have been worse. It could have been this. And so I just think that that's interesting to note, because anytime I think of like a young adult stealing or doing this type of stuff, all right, well, what's kind of going on in the home life? But as far as I'm aware, nothing significant was really going on there. So this was more of an internal, whatever she was going through, it was internally.
Well, yeah. Sometimes it's just the thrill to see if you could get away with it.
Right.
I think it was impulsive. I agree.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. And I have been the friend with some, like, that did not know when my friend was stealing and got caught, and it was so awkward. I had no idea.
Well, well, and something that is brought up as well that Julie actually states in the podcast is she kind of speculates, so this is not our speculation, this is her sister's speculation, that this was Maura's attempt at getting kicked out of West Point, so that she didn't have to quit herself. So West Point has an honor code, and obviously stealing breaks that honor code.
And it seems like most people always describe her as a free spirit, and I guess that's kind of where like the control and maybe seems to be a little bit of a battle here, you know.
Well,
I think she was suffocating there.
Yeah,
I think her spirit was suffocating there, and she was wanting to do something that could get her out, that wasn't going to be drastic, but something that would still get her kicked out.
Yeah.
Julie said that Maura was her own biggest critic, like that she was the most hard on herself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So obviously this ends up going into, there is a committee of peers, so cadets that are also at West Point, that make up a committee that decide the fate, which they were known as the honor board. And so Maura was actually sent to the honor board because of this situation. Was what happened, they were trying to decide if what happened was bad enough that she had to be separated from the military academy. According to Julie, this honor board had lasted weeks. Maura struggled through it a lot. She was missing class because of it. She was failing classes and failing tests because she was so stressed about it. Just in general, like her life had kind of taken a downward spiral after this happened. And like my personal thoughts go to, I think she probably thought that they would have just kicked her out, especially because this didn't just occur on West Point, which would still be bad, but she stole at Fort Knox. Like, so I'm wondering if she waited to do this at a technically like more high profile lockdown base, because especially a visiting cadet at the base, as a way to like heighten the incident almost.
Did she do it at the exchange?
On Fort Knox.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's like a department store for military, and they get like, they have brand names and they get a lot of discounts if people aren't aware.
Yeah. So she ends up being like, they don't dismiss her. She's not separated. But the ending of this honor board ends up kind of coming close to 9/11. So, the way that it's explained by Julie and by those around at this time is obviously everything at West Point changed when 9/11 happened. It kind of, she said that their time there started as like peace and prosperity, you know, just working as cadets on the military base. But then as soon as 9/11 happened, the base went on lockdown, and the possibility of going on to active duty became more prevalent. It became a lot more stressful environment. People just were unsure now what being a cadet was going to equal out to. And this all happened around the time that the response for her honor board was supposed to come out. So at that time, it was kind of just like, you're good. Now we're going to deal with 9/11 almost.
And can you imagine if she was feeling suffocated prior to that? Imagine the pressure that she must have felt at that point after 9/11.
Right.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. one important part of this honor board, though, is during her honor board, she was given an honor committee mentor that kind of just goes through telling her, here's what you should be doing, here's what you have to expect. And his name is Bill. She ends up starting a relationship with Bill, and he is still a character. Nice character is a bad word when we're talking about real people, but he's still in this situation. He is still her boyfriend when she goes missing 2 years later. So she meets Bill when he is her mentor for this honor committee, and they continue dating. He is, I believe, Julie's age, so he is 2 years older than Maura. And let's see. Yeah, there were also some statistics where it said in 2021, only 13% of cadets who violated the honor code were actually separated from West Point. So it's not like they just kicked everyone out or something. It was something that, I don't know. I guess I was expecting it to be more like, if you have to go to the honor board, you should be more nervous than not. You know what I mean?
And like, obviously I'm always going to take the family, their opinion at great respect and into my opinion. But I don't personally think the stealing of the eyeliner was an attempt to get kicked out, versus I'm less likely to believe that because there would have been a much more secure way, versus I think she was potentially struggling with some internal battle, and sometimes our behaviors don't accurately align with what that battle is. So something as, okay, well, what would your internal battle be for stealing an eyeliner? She listened to the whole backstory Mallory just gave, and beating every record in the school. She was the ideal kid, right? And something as just testing the boundaries and doing something you weren't supposed to do, even as minimal. It wasn't about the eyeliner versus, I don't know, but I'm less likely personally to believe that was an attempt to get kicked out versus struggling and not knowing, being unsure and testing the limits and just seeing, because she's never done it before, that more of that.
I think it's a thrill. I agree.
Yeah.
I think
Seeing
she
how
wanted
it
to
felt
feel
is what you're
alive.
saying?
Yeah, feel
Right.
something.
That makes sense.
Especially with what we know is to come. There's a lot that I see that aligns with that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So with Bill, she was very infatuated. To the point where one of the examples was like, Maura would get up super early, go to the West Point Post Exchange to grab him coffee, and then run with like steaming hot coffee all the way back to give it to him when he woke up. So it was like she was very much infatuated. And then, so after, once again, 9/11 happens, she ends up making the decision that she is not going to take the oath and is going to leave the academy and transfer schools. At this point, I think it just got the best of her. She was like, I can't be deployed. I can't do, like, she just mentally and physically was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And she ends up transferring to the University of Massachusetts Amherst in the fall of 2002. So let me grab, let's see where we're at. Here we go. Oh, here's a cute picture of Maura. There's Maura there, guys.
Look at those dimples.
I know, right? Doesn't it just make you want to smile just looking at her?
She had a great smile.
Her smile is amazing.
Yeah. I wish I could look that good with my hair pulled back.
I know, right?
I just look like an egg. It looks like I go bald.
I look like a thumb.
Oh, man. Okay. So we have UMass Amherst. So we're going to get into a handful of things that have happened now since she's been at UMass. And then we will go into the days leading up to the disappearance. And then the actual day of the disappearance, and the disappearance itself, as well as the aftermath and everything like that. Once again, we'll be on Melissa Jade's channel on Thursday at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, which will be our part 2 to this. But the different parts and different rumor mills and stuff like that that have been out about this case come into play when we're talking about the instances that occur here at UMass Amherst. So, let me get to my notes now. So, also, during this, Maura kept her long-distance relationship with Bill at this time. He ends up, I think it was his graduating year because he was 2 years older, so he had graduated in 2002, which was the year she, yeah, we'll get to that, JDR. Yeah. All right. So, and then he ends up getting stationed somewhere else. I want to say like Oklahoma or something like that. But they continued to stay together. Now, there is an instance that Julie brings up that gets brought up again in the investigation once she goes missing. So I'm just going to touch on it. But Julie, Maura's sister, does find out that Bill cheated on Maura. And she was actually livid about it, obviously, because you're going to be livid if anyone you care about is cheated on, obviously. But Maura and Bill decided to work through it, and Julie was kind of like, I just put like my friendly face on and did it for Maura, but she was not happy. So she loved, like I said, on here, she had a lot of newfound freedoms, and it was like little things that she really, really, really enjoyed. One of the main things that was brought up was that she got to pick her own bed sheets. She had a pair of purple cow printed bed sheets that she literally would just put them on, and then when they needed to be washed, she would wash them and put them back on. It was something she was known for having in the dorms when she was there. She loved them. And it was something that I think she was like, this is me. I get to choose this, and this is what I'm choosing. And she loved it. Let's see. She also liked the ability to obviously sleep in. She liked the ability to go out at night. She liked the ability to kind of break the rules a little bit, which is kind of going to what MJ was saying. She enjoyed the fact that, like, she could show up late to class, get, like, yelled at or a point taken off, but she wasn't kicked out of the school. So I think she kind of did enjoy the, the freedoms of it.
She was actually pretty artsy and loved design.
Yep. Yeah. And then one of the other things is like one of the things that she was very vocal about was, displaying more than 3 photos in her bedroom, because apparently at West Point you could only have a certain, amount of pictures on the wall, and your books had to be in descending order on your shelf. And she's like, when she got there, like Shay just said, like she had the ability to design her life now. And it was something that she was very, very much enjoying. So it says many of Maura's credits ended up transferring, which is good. And she entered Amherst as a sophomore. And she also, going to Amherst, then picked what she wanted to study, and she ended up following in the footsteps of her mom and got accepted into the nursing program at Amherst. She was also accepted onto the Amherst cross country and track teams, which is not surprising. And let's see. Oh, a little tidbit as well, that doesn't necessarily come into play now, but it will come into play in the future, is one of the prerequisites of being accepted into the nursing program is that you had reliable transportation to get to and from your clinicals. Because of this, Fred, Maura's father, ended up giving Maura a car, and it was a 1996 black Saturn sedan. Very soon after this, the car does end up breaking down. It's very unreliable. And we will find out more about this car as the time goes on. Let me see. Just making sure I'm seeing all of you guys still. Okay. I've been on the other tab for so long that I wasn't in StreamYard. So I was just making sure I'm not just talking to myself. At this time,
you're doing great.
I just kind of get into a tangent then. So,
Maura
had 2 part-time jobs. One was as a dorm security guard at Melville Hall, and then the other one was a work-study program at an art gallery. She kind of more often worked events at the art gallery. But she spent a lot of time with Julie. Well, Julie actually ended up being deployed. Was it to Kuwait or Korea? One of the ones that start with K. I have it written in here.
I thought it was Korea, but Korea. I could be mistaken.
Yep, Julie, it's literally my next sentence down. Because of course it is. But she did spend a lot of time with her older sister Kathleen, and also helped out her younger brother Curtis a lot. Next one down. Julie was stationed in South Korea as a lieutenant in the army, but she said that she talked to Maura mostly on AOL Instant Messenger, which was very big on, like, very big at the time. Even I was on it, and I shouldn't have been at that age. Like, crazy. But they would talk on the phone sometimes. And like Julie went into kind of remembering what her and Maura would talk about when she was in Korea. And one of her main things is she said that she would like to practice different Korean, slang or sentences or something like that, and try to have Maura guess what she was saying. And then she wouldn't obviously be able to get it, and Julie wouldn't be good at talking it. And so they would just end up like giggling for hours while they were talking. And it was something that she holds very, like, dear to her heart, are those conversations with her. While at Amherst, Maura becomes friends with a fellow runner who is actually from New York, named Kate, which Kate does come into play towards the disappearance, which is why I'm bringing her up. But Kate and Maura would train a lot together. They became very close, to the point where, like, Julie suggested that when she was at Fort Bragg, that Maura and Kate visit her there for spring break, and then they would all go to Myrtle Beach. And yeah, one of the things, Kate is actually interviewed on the podcast, and she says one of the things that she remembers the most about Maura is how fast she drinks her coffee. Did you guys hear that part on the podcast?
Yeah, I thought it was funny.
I know.
It's always the little things, right?
Yeah, she would be like, we'd literally go to the mall, we'd stop, we'd get coffee, and we wouldn't even make it to the store, and she's throwing her cup away. And it'd be like super hot coffee. And it's just like, that was one of the things that she was like, every single time that we would be together, she would amaze me at how fast she could drink her coffee. Another individual in this, which we don't have any information about, I'm not going to speculate about her, is Sarah.
Yep.
Sarah is Maura's friend from the art gallery. She has never openly talked about the case, but not only has she never openly talked about the case, she's also never returned any calls or messages from Maura's family. So she's pretty much been silent.
Or LE, correct?
I'm not sure about LE.
She only did like one time, and then didn't talk to them after that. Correct.
Now, with that, like I said, I'm not saying she had anything to do with it. I'm not saying any of that. That's just
I was just
a fact.
stating a fact.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of hop now to, we're going to kind of go back and forth because that's kind of how it worked out on the podcast, because I'm kind of just following it because I don't want to get into anything that her sister wouldn't want to get into, because I don't want to necessarily get into like super speculation, if that makes sense. So that's why I'm kind of following Julie's timeline, so that I know it's stuff that the family has put out, so that I know it's something that she wants shared, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to go back to Bill for a second. Maura and Bill, they did a lot of breaking up and getting back together. Maura would go visit him and stay with his mentors, who were known as the McDonalds. And then he would, come and stay there, different things like that. And then eventually, like I said, Bill was stationed at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. But as you guys can see here, I have New Flame written down, and that's pretty much all he was, is a new flame. But during one of her off seasons with Bill, she ends up starting a romantic relationship with Hussein Baghdadi, who is a graduate assistant track coach of Maura's. So he was a little bit older, and he was very nice. I'm trying to remember everything like off the top of my head that they were saying about him. He was very friendly, and he was friendly with everyone to the point where it wasn't until they were seen like kissing that people even realized that they had a thing. And even Maura's dad, Fred, had met him at one point, and he actually, the assistant track coach, actually told Maura's dad that he was writing a book. So it didn't really last long, but there was someone in between there, and I mean, at this point, we don't know what happened to Maura, so I think it's important to put all of the factual information out there, and then everyone can take from it what they want. Like I said, that didn't last long with him, and she ended up getting back with Bill. Now, Julie did ask Kate, her friend Kate, not the one from the art gallery, but her running friend, her thoughts on Bill, and she just said, like, he was fine. She didn't really spend any time with them. She did have one specific memory where they had gone to a Wings down the road to watch football, the three of them, and it was fun. She didn't see anything, too crazy, or anything like that. And then at that time, Bill was joining Maura's family on their trips. And here's another instance of something that happened during this time frame that plays into what happens later on. So Bill joins Maura's family on a trip to New Hampshire. It was one of those camping trips that they used to do as kids. They still tried to do it as a family. But Bill ended up having to leave early, and it was just described as for army things. So I don't know what that means, but okay. And so Maura decides, like, oh, I'll just drive you to the airport from where we were. And so Maura brought him to the Boston Logan Airport. And I want to say it might have been after. I don't know if it was after she dropped Bill off or before. If any of you guys know, please let me know. But she ends up getting pulled over for speeding. Oh, really, Citizen Sleuth? That's awesome. I mean, not awesome, but you know what I mean. That's cool. Do you guys know about this incident?
No.
Okay. Well, this actually brings into something that I didn't even know about this case, so I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts. Now, I'm pretty sure it's after she drops Bill off at the airport. She ends up getting pulled over for speeding. She receives a summons to appear on August 27th, 2003. She is fined $360 at this summons, and New Hampshire suspends her license for 30 days.
Oh, wow.
So the one thing about this, though, because I want to say she was going like 30 over the speed limit, like double the speed limit. Like it was something, it was like 65 and a 30 type of situation. Something like that. I don't know for sure. But one part of this situation that is interesting that Julie brings up is that in order to drive again, you need to fill out a license reinstatement form. Now, another part of this is in New Hampshire, to be able to fill out this form, you need to do it in person. So she was already back at school at this point, and so she did not do it before her disappearance. The forms were found in her vehicle when her car is found after she disappears.
Wait, I thought it was the accident forms.
No.
That's what they said. It was the accident forms.
There could have been two, but these forms specifically were also found in the car, meaning she never did them.
Okay, I think they said that there was two. From the wreck with her father's car, and then something else. Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
I didn't realize those were the other ones. That's interesting.
Yeah,
I was aware of this. I do remember this.
Yeah, I do too, now that you say it.
So, according to this timeline, during this entire situation, from this point on, Maura does not have an active driver's license.
Wow. Okay.
So, which was something I didn't realize, I guess. And it's not because she couldn't. It's not like she was not supposed to be driving. It's just she never had the ability to go up to New Hampshire to do the reinstatement form in person yet. Like she had to turn it in person. So let's see.
Which I believe was part of the reason there was speculation why she was nervous, correct?
Could have been, yes.
I mean, I remember people talking about that. Not Julie, but I remember way back then when it happened, I remember that being discussed.
Well, right. Yeah, that was one of the theories. Another one obviously was the fact that there was the wine in the front seat. There still are a lot of different theories of potentially what occurred here. But this was one where I was like, that literally answers so many questions for me. Like, I was like, oh, I was surprised. And then I was like, oh, okay. So once she gets back to school after this incident, she actually ends up getting hurt. So for the 2003 season, she was not able to do cross country. She tried to rehab her injury, but as she was rehabbing her injury, Julie was saying like her times kept dropping. It just kept getting her times kept getting worse. And I'm sure just based on what we've seen, it's got to be like she seemed to be very much a perfectionist. So if you are trying to do something and it's literally going backwards, it has to be super frustrating.
Yeah.
So after her times started dropping, she kind of was just like, whatever, I'm just going to start focusing on my nursing program instead. She obviously had stayed friends with Kate, even though most of their time was spent running together, but now it was more just like chill runs and not competitive running. And this was actually when she started partying on campus. One of Kate's favorite memories was the Greeks. Did you guys remember that part?
Mm-hmm.
They would do these relay racers completely naked, where they would just run like 500 yards completely naked in the middle of campus, and then the police or someone would show up, the campus security, and they'd all just flee and then go to a party somewhere else, like get their clothes back on and then go to a party. And I'm also gonna just go out and state this now: partying on a college campus, regardless of age, regardless of all of that, normal. So I'm not saying she started partying on campus as like a red flag. No. Like
We
no,
all did that.
no.
Everyone
So
parties in college.
yeah. So let's see here. I'm gonna make sure what I got going on the top one here. Show you guys a few more pictures. So there's the pictures. Some more pictures of Maura. So let's see. She made plans with her high school friends around the holidays. So this is in 2003. They had a college t-shirt exchange. She met up with them at the 99 restaurant in Weymouth, I don't once again know how to say it, Massachusetts. This was the last time a lot of her high school friends saw her. But they did exchange emails with her between Christmas and her disappearance. One of the more notable emails that Maura sent was at the end of January, the year she disappeared. So January 29th, 2004. Maura had sent out an email trying to coordinate a plan to see Dane Cook in Connecticut on February 12th, 2004. So, I quoted what Julie had said was in the email. It just said, like, Dane Cook is playing UMass. We went to get tickets and it was sold out. Missed out again. Did some research and found out that he was playing in stores. Tickets are only $10. Let me know if anyone is interested. It was kind of sent out to a number of people, but she was planning. The point of this is she was planning on something for February 12th to go see this with her friends to go see Dane Cook. Okay. Ugh. During this time, trigger warning, Maura was still struggling with her disordered eating. And then there was a statistic. It says nearly 10 million women in the U.S. struggle with anorexia or bulimia. And it is actually far more prevalent in female college athletes, which I just thought was an important aspect to put into this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you guys all ditch me?
No, I'm here. You're just
Okay.
doing such a great job.
Yeah.
You're doing awesome.
I don't want to throw you off.
I know.
No, I want you guys to talk. I have my notes, so I can always go back. So please talk. If you guys have something to say, feel free.
Okay.
So I'm going to kind of go back and forth because it goes from the situations before her disappearance to then the last time Julie sees Maura. So before her disappearance, there was an incident at the school, so at Amherst, where Maura had obtained another student's credit card numbers and started ordering food late at night. So this is once again kind of, I think it was you, MJ, might have been, that had brought it up earlier about ordering large amounts of food.
Oh, that was Shay.
Was it Shay? Okay. I was going to say, I didn't know which one of you it was. I knew someone mentioned it at the beginning here. But once again, interesting because she had her own money. But I was listening to another person go over Maura's case just during all of this. And they were stating, which I don't remember this because I was young, but where they would print the entire credit card number on a receipt. Is that accurate?
Oh, yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes, it was.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, and that was how she ended up getting this, is she just happened to find a receipt somewhere in the dorms, and it had the credit card number on it, so she just started issuing, or, like, ordering large amounts of food,
Like
late
pizza
at night.
and some subs.
Well, yeah, but it would be, like, 3 pizzas, or 6 subs and a pizza. Like, crazy amounts where it's like, how is one person ordering this regardless?
Mm-hmm. And we all know in dorms you just have a small little fridge.
Well, right. And so it's like, who's ordering this amount of food this late at night if it's not like for a party or something like that? So then eventually this fellow student actually notices the charges and reports it to campus police. This ends up going into a sting operation, which sounds so official. That ends up, they allow for the individual who stole the credit card, which ends up being Maura, to order food. And then when the delivery gets there, the police catch her, and she is caught, obviously, stealing this. Once again, when asked about this, she's like, I don't know why I did it. I don't know. And listening to Julie and stuff like that talk about it, it had, I think, once again, it's just the binge eating disorder, the eating disorder. It's, she needed, late at night to figure it. I'm not as familiar with it. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, it circles back around to what I said earlier about not thinking that she stole the eyeliner for purposes of getting kicked out versus she was testing the limits. And it's not so much because she needed to steal or to do these reckless things versus a desire to, being tempted to, because I can, because it seems like she never kind of went through that rebellious stage, and she was at this point. And so I don't know if there was a purpose to it. I mean, I could circle back around with the eating disorder and ordering large amounts, maybe not the opportunity to not have it on her account. It's not so much she couldn't pay for it versus it's a distancing technique. It's not on my account. It's not with my card. It didn't happen type of thing if she's binge eating. But more so, she's just doing it because she can.
Right.
And I don't think there really was so much a deeper meaning versus she was clearly going through something and she was testing the waters.
Or doing the
And
opposite.
she said, I don't know why. I think that's probably true. She doesn't know why.
She doesn't understand why she's doing the behavior she's doing.
Right.
Just to not be Maura, just to do it, just to feel it, just to see what it feels like, just to do something that's not perfect.
Yeah, and I think too, with her being as extraordinary of a person, like, her family literally explains it as, like, she was good at everything. She could get straight A's without even trying. And so it's kind of also like everyone expects me to be this person. I'm going to show them I'm not. Or being held up on that pedestal and being tired of being held up on that pedestal. Even if it's
the polar opposite of
yes,
who she really was, because she just needed that escape.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that even if, like, obviously Maura's missing, so we can't ask her. But I mean, even if people go through this and have the ability to conquer it in time, they sometimes still don't know why. And I think that's an important part of this.
I went through something similar when I was a little bit older than her, just trying to be the opposite of me. I was, I always had to be perfect and do everything perfect. And you sometimes just want to not be the person that everyone thinks you are, and not forever, but just for a minute. That's what I think of it.
I feel like I related to Maura a lot, even though I was the only child, that there was this like perception of having to always be perfect.
Right. Me
too. Yeah, and so like I went balls wild in college. I did stuff like I would have never.
I saw pictures. I've seen pictures of that.
I'm sure. So, I guess it's like I don't think it always means like it's leading to some kind of like breakdown or some sort, but I do think sometimes it's more of like an internal battle with who you've always been,
Yeah.
where you want to go. It's like you're kind of trying to find yourself.
Yeah, trying to figure out who you actually are versus who you've been told you are growing up.
Or who everyone thinks you are.
Yeah. Okay. So after this, she's actually given a 3-month probation, contingent on good behavior. So as long as she had good behavior for 3 months, she'd be taken off probation, and this would kind of just go away. To a certain extent, I don't know anything else behind the scenes. I don't know if she had to pay it back. I don't know, but that was just the kind of overall situation. So now we're going to backtrack just a little bit and go back to her last Christmas. So we already talked about the Christmas. She met up with a lot of her high school friends. But now we're going to go back to her last Christmas, which is the same Christmas as that. But from Julie's point of view. So Julie came home for that Christmas. And she remembers it very fondly. Maura was there. They exchanged gifts as a family. There was a lot of laughing, a lot of good times. I've heard different things. Even in the podcast that went back and forth, it's like no one really realized anything was wrong. It was normal. It was this. But then another point in the podcast, she's like, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what. So I'm not exactly sure how it sits, but at the time, it's obviously her last time seeing Maura, and she's remembering the good times of that. So during this time, Maura also left early from their Christmas to go visit Bill's family in Ohio for Christmas. And Bill ends up gifting Maura a cell phone for Christmas, as well as a pair of black leather gloves, which both will come into play when we go over the disappearance on Melissa's channel on Thursday. But not only did he give her the phone, but like his family gave her prepaid calling cards, and she was technically on Bill's plan.
They had a family plan.
Yes. So that was the Christmas before she ends up going missing. Then we go back to like the email for the Dane Cook show, everything like that. And
To
then
say really quick, that was a huge gift because back then,
yeah,
it cost a lot of money to have a cell phone and call people and text and whatever. Just
yeah, and I think
a
he
big
ended
deal.
up doing it because they were so long distance that he was like, I want to be able to talk to you. Like, I don't want you to have to be in a like situated area for me to be able to talk to you too. And I think she liked that well. Just because they were long distance, he gave it to her so that they could stay in contact more often, which makes sense.
I remember having to use calling cards and stuff.
You can still get them.
Can you really?
Yeah, they have them at Dollar General.
Oh, sweet.
As well as phones for like up to $49.
Well, geez, I didn't know that.
Yep. Just in case anyone wanted to know. So now we're going to get back into the lead up to where we're going to stop this presentation, to then pick it back up on Thursday at Melissa's channel. Which, just for a heads up for you guys on panel, we're going to make it through the accident and then stop. Not her accident in New Hampshire, the other accident.
Yep.
Okay. Just so you guys are aware of where I'm going to end up stopping.
Perfect.
All right. So after obviously winter break, Maura returned to school. She actually ends up setting up her dorm room in Kennedy Hall, room 415. Which she was actually very, very excited about because she got a single room for this semester, which was good because she was not a fan of her last roommate. Just too much chatter, too much in and out. She just really enjoyed, the spending time alone, having her own personal space.
I think also by the time you're an upperclassman and her studies, it's nice to have that alone time.
Especially in like a nursing program.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
a lot
it's intense.
Yeah. So then Julie goes into kind of the setup of Maura's room, which I know sounds kind of just like trivial information, but I still, once again, am trying to humanize who Maura was, because there could be something that I tell you guys that you're like, oh my God, I love that too. And it connects you more. So it was said that in her dorm, she had set up a really clunky stereo system that was planked by the her favorite green. Now, this is controversial. Do you say Appalachian?
That's correct.
Appalachian?
Well, I've always heard Appalachian.
It's said two different ways, so that's why I was saying it's controversial. Regardless.
Tomato.
Yeah, Appalachian Mountain Club mugs. She was a music lover. She had older taste. So some of the favorites at the time was Otis Redding, Bill Withers, Marvin Gaye, Led Zeppelin, Dave Matthews Band. She loved Coldplay, the New Radicals. And then the type of books and stuff that she liked is she was gifted the Da Vinci Code, the book, for Christmas. So that was kind of the, like, just who Maura was as a person. It kind of gives you a little bit more insight.
If you want to see what it looks like on the family website, they do have pictures of her room.
Yep, they do. Which I do have that link down below in the description, the family's website, which is themissingmauramurray.org, I believe. Bye, Anna. So now we get to one of the big questions in the case.
Were you going to mention, or were we going to mention kind of what it was like in her room, like when her mom and them visited? Okay.
That's what I was one of the big questions in this case was whether or not her room was packed or unpacked at the time of her disappearance. So according to Julie, according to Maura's sister Julie in the podcast, the police, in the way that they worded things in a lot of the reports, kind of wasn't accurate, I would say. So the initial police reports gave the impression that her room was all packed up. This was something that came out early on, and people were like, well, if it's packed up, then she left. Like,
right.
What do you mean? But her family, like, is adamant, and they disagree. The family was in her dorm shortly before. I believe it was her mom and her younger brother, Curtis.
No, it was her older brother.
Was it?
Yeah, I think it was the older brother, because, Yeah,
it was Frank Jr.
Fred, yeah.
Fred, okay. Yeah, he was talking about it.
Sorry.
Okay, yes. I knew it was one of the brothers and then the mom, right?
Right. Because he was just, like, more so, saying, like, I think kind of the tone of this is just the takeaway is kind of, maybe ask the families about, like, what is considered common or not common, because it gave a perception.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
I agree. Because based on what they're saying, yeah, it is like what they're saying it was, but that's a normal unpack for Maura. So the family had said that they saw her dorm room shortly before. They had gone out to Applebee's. She was still unpacking at that time. Yes, left.
I meant LFT. Sorry.
And this was a week before.
About left and right.
I was like, shit. Sorry.
What is she correcting?
I was gonna say that was a week before I think she went missing, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it was with they said I think they said within a couple weeks before she went missing is what it had said. So but he had said like she was still unpacking when we were there. But in the photos it doesn't look unsimilar, but it looks more unpacked. If that's how I kind of understood it. Is that how you guys understood it? Like it looked more
unpacked than it did when
he was
him
there.
And his mom was just there.
So to him it looked like she had just finished unpacking and she was just organized and cleanly
there was progress of settling in versus intentions on actually leaving.
Not everybody pulls up on their first day and like unboxes and unloads, you know?
Oh, yeah. Well, and see, I know people, me specifically, I would be up all night. I'd have to have everything done. Like, it bothers me. It's the same as like getting home from a trip. I need to take my clothes out of my suitcase and get everything done. Like, I don't like it. And I know people very close to me who probably still have their clothes in there from their vacation 2 years ago. Like,
right.
I'm an unpacker as well. I find like with the way my brain works, I find when everything's like messy or not put up, it's kind of chaotic for me. So things have its place, but I'm not a crazy perfectionist. I've given up on that. There's just, boundaries there.
Do you want me to pull up her room photos?
Yeah, that'd be great. And then I can just share yours and then go back to this.
Yep.
Because other than this is like that one, and then I have the accident report for the accident on campus that I'll go through and shows like a layout of that accident and how that one occurred and the drawing of it and stuff.
So when they made entry, because they made entry a couple times, but they eventually went in and they took photos of her dorm room as it was left. And as you'll be able to see, it's also just so funny looking at the differences, right? Like of the times and seeing the equipment, the stereo, the computer. But I don't know, like it doesn't look lived in, but you really have to listen to how the family describes, because every person is very individual and unique. I know me, if I'm staying somewhere, even I'm the type where if I'm staying at a hotel, even for one night, I take the stuff out of my suitcase and I do put it in the drawers, and I like feeling, I set up the little end table. I like feeling set up. Not everybody is like that though. So to me, it may look, oh, well, it does not look like you were planning on staying here or living, but to somebody else, that's not the case.
Some people are okay living out of a suitcase for months.
Yeah. For me, when I go on vacation, I very rarely, unless I have to like dress up for something, will I take the stuff out of my suitcase. I'd much rather just be throwing the shit around and then just make sure I double, triple check before I check out that I have everything. I'm giving Melissa a heart attack right now.
Well, it's just so ominous looking at this.
Yeah.
I don't know. Hold on. I don't know if that was that. But it's just so ominous looking at it, because you think, like, when I look at this, I'm looking at the last emails that she exchanged and the searches that I know we'll get into. And it's like, I don't know, there's something very telling about when somebody goes missing and you either look at the last CCTV that they're caught on or somewhere that they last spent their moments, and you try to figure out what happened. Like, you were here. What happened?
Yeah.
And I can't, there's not like there's anything that really gives us any indication.
There's no clues. It's just there.
It's like frozen time.
Yep.
Exactly. Frozen time.
Which is crazy.
But you'll also need to keep this as context of the size of the dorm rooms, because we'll get into that later on, but they were very small, like max 8 people, they said, like that could really be in there content. But yeah, even just with the amount of hangers that are there that aren't being utilized, it to me, I can understand why people were like, where's the clothes? Like, why would you even have that many hangers if you weren't utilizing it? But like Mallory just got done saying, the brother and mother who came, she showed them the dorm room. They got lunch, right? Or I think they got lunch. they said it was even more unpacked than when they first came.
Yeah. And it just looked normal. To them, it looked lived in.
Oh, monkey.
No.
Okay.
Hi, Murder Candy Podcast. There's also many documentary series on Peacock app on the case too, but didn't.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's called The Disappearance of Maura Murray. It's really good.
Is it? Okay. Sweet. Thank you, Red. I appreciate that. Thank you for the $10 super chat. Thank you. Okay. Interesting. I just get to add it right back. I'm just going to add that back for now, just so that her picture is up there while we're continuing to talk. Let's see. So this is also, you guys saw in those pictures that Melissa had shown. She had set up her computer. She was still using the AOL Instant Messenger quite a bit. One part that Julie focuses on for a little bit, she's not, how do I say this without saying it? She's not insinuating anything, but she's noting it because it's a fact, if that makes sense. Is there were two men that Maura had known from when she was at West Point. She did not utilize their real identities, so she calls one Dan and one Tom. And Tom had IM'd with Maura days before her disappearance, but it started to get a little bit interesting because he had told Julie that Ellie never reached out to him. And quoting the podcast, she said he believed that law enforcement prioritized other people who had communicated with Maura closer to her disappearance, but that she wanted to note that Maura had his home address. So they weren't just like IMing and that was it. Like he was an actual friend to her. And the fact that she's missing now, anyone that she potentially had their address of is, a potential place to check, But one thing that she did say was a red flag when it came to Tom was that Tom had claimed to never have visited Maura at UMass. So he's like, no, I never visited her while he was there. Well, to Julie's surprise, she found a photo of him with Maura at UMass. She actually had sent the photo to Tom and was kind of like oh, you never been there? Here's the photo. And he stopped responding to her altogether.
How weird is that?
Yeah.
To where? Sorry.
She sent the photo to Tom after he had claimed he'd never visited Maura at UMass.
Julie I remember that.
Finding a picture of Tom at UMass with Maura, and she sent him the picture, and he immediately stopped responding, where before he was like talking with Julie about this situation.
I do remember that. Sorry.
Well,
no, you're good.
Can I just say, with the podcast, which again I urge everybody to go and listen to it, Julie did a really amazing job. Hats off to her. She did a really amazing job at presenting exactly how it unfolded through their experience and acknowledging suspicious things without ever, in my opinion, pointing guilt or pointing accusations. She made sure anytime she acknowledged this was weird to me, but absolutely in no way am I implying that this person had any involvement. So by the end of the last episode, I genuinely did not even know what the family believed happened, because that's how well done it was as far as laying it out and acknowledging weird things that happened without pointing blame or even leading people to believe anybody had involvement.
Right. Well, yeah, it was very, very well done. And like she said, even when saying this information where we're like, what? Side-eyeing it? she still, in a way, did not give anything to say, like, people should be side-eyeing him. Like, it was very well done. And for those of you that are asking, the podcast is called Media Pressure. You can find it pretty much anywhere that you listen to podcasts. I do have it.
It's in the pod. I didn't even know I had a podcast app, Mallory, in my iPhone, and it just popped right up.
Yeah, it's also on Spotify. That's where I listen to it. There's a website. There's everything in the description down below. I do have a link to the family's website that actually, I have two links. I have it to the website, and then underneath that, it has the actual Media Pressure link that gives you guys a link to where you can listen to the podcast as well. So that is in the description down below.
Can I say two things real quick?
No.
Okay.
Just kidding. Go ahead.
So, like, if you guys didn't kind of catch on to like what was going on, so Media Pressure is going to be designed for the victims' families to be able to give their loved one a voice. And Maura's sister is like not outgoing. She's very shy. So like doing this was like really big for her. And I actually had heard about the podcast before it came out on Mile Higher with Kendall and Josh Ray.
Yes.
Did a like a 2 to 3 hour interview with her, and it was amazing. So if you just want a little extra, I really enjoyed that as well. So I think they always take a
after the live.
Okay, yeah. Sorry to drop it. I just felt like they did a very.
I love them. I follow them. I'm
a
big fan of them. So.
And the producer, Sarah Turney, is such an advocate for victims and their families, and she's really changing the whole space by what she's doing. She's remarkable, a remarkable human.
Yeah. She just, her sister's trial,
who's
man.
had so much loss and still fights for other people.
Well, and especially now with her potentially, with Sarah, like getting her dad arrested and then having him get off.
It's horrible.
Yeah. The fact that she still has the ability to go fight for other people's cases too. I mean, I would feel defeated. So it's like very, very impressive. No, you're good. One other instance though about Tom is that also when Julie was going through all of Maura's stuff, after she disappeared, she actually found a bunch of letters that Tom had written her, as well as birthday cards that he had given her. And she was keeping those. So those were something that she had kept like in a box.
She said her sister said she kept probably every birthday card she's ever been given.
Yeah. So
I actually do that.
I do too.
I have a trunk. I put them in like an oak chest.
I have all of them too.
Interesting now that we saw how her dorm was, the fact that she kept everything like that, but was so minimalistic with everything else. It's interesting.
Yeah. Guys, we're not quite done yet. We still have one of the bigger parts of this. I'm actually going to just bring the other thing up so that way you guys can kind of see where we're going to go with it. But this one. All right. So let's see. There was also another thing that she had found, quick before we get to this part, is that inside a box of letters, tucked inside a Duke basketball program, was a printed 2-year-old email from her boyfriend Bill apologizing for infidelity early on in their relationship. This is an important part because in the police reports, they had reported it as a personal note left out on top of a box. Julie believes that this was distinct language that pointed it towards being potentially like a goodbye letter, a suicide letter, something like that. When in reality, the letter was just a printed email from Bill that she had kept from 2 years prior of him saying how sorry he was for infidelity. Which is interesting that the police did frame it as a personal note left out on top of a box.
Made it seem like it was ominously sitting there left for people to find.
Yes. Okay, so we're gonna kind of get now into the days before she goes missing. So a couple weeks before, Maura ends up visiting their father in Connecticut. She drove the Saturn there. On the way there, something goes wrong. The car is chugging. There's black smoke coming out of it. They end up taking it to a garage, and it has a blown cylinder. The dad ended up driving it back to UMass, parking it in a lot, and said that he was just going to get rid of the car when he came back down to UMass a few weekends later. Fred, go ahead. Someone say something.
Do you want us to say something, or you thought we said something?
I thought you said something.
Oh, no.
Okay. After they brought this car back, she parked it. Fred specifically told Maura, and he says it in the podcast, like his own voice says it, you do not drive that car. It is not a safe car. That's true, Harlot. That's a good point. If she did specifically leave that note out, could it have been like this is why or something like that? I mean, it definitely could have been read into, but I think the fact that they just specified it as a personal note left out on top, I mean, I guess when you think about it, that's what it is. But I think leaving it out could potentially, like leaving out the description, more of the description, does make it seem more ominous. Just in my opinion. But I definitely get what you're saying, though. So after he says, you do not drive that car, it is not a safe car. But I remember he does say something along the lines of, if you do have to drive it, make sure you're just driving it like from one side of campus to the other. Don't drive it anywhere far. It's going to break down. It's not reliable. But she did end up being able to carpool with other people in the nursing program to get to her clinicals. She did, or her dad had planned a trip to UMass to help Maura buy a car on February 7th, 2004. So this is getting into the weekend of her disappearance, leading up to it. So Fred Murray, which is her father, he had a job now that gave him a little bit more wiggle room when it came to money. So he was like, I'm just going to buy Maura a car. Okay. He says, doesn't he get a new car? And then he was just going to buy Maura a new car.
Yeah, I thought he had a rental. His car, his insurance figured out it would cover it. He got a rental, and then the plan was to buy Maura a new car.
Yes. Okay. So to do this, though, his bank was not down near Maura's school, so he needed to take out cash before he went. At this time, the ATM had a limit of how much he could take out, which was like $500 at a time. So he ended up doing 8 different withdrawals, in a short time frame before he made it down to Maura's, which ended up being about $4,000 that he ends up bringing down, thinking, this could potentially be enough for, a down payment on a car for her, or, it's something. It's something.
I thought it was like $6,000, but he was taking out $400 increments. Am I wrong?
Yeah, it was 400.
No, it was 4,000 that he could take out, but in the max increments. I don't remember if it was 400 at a time, something a day, but he got out 4,000, I thought.
The reason I got these numbers is because I was looking at the transcript of the actual podcast.
Okay, cool. So, I trust you. I just remember 400.
No, so I will say that the 6,000, 7,400 do come into play because those are the amounts of that the cars are that they end up finding.
Right.
That's okay.
So that might be where you're getting those numbers from.
Right.
So he ends up driving down there with about $4,000 to help her find a car. This is the weekend of February 7th, 2004. Maura was scheduled to work a security shift at Melville Hall on Thursday, February 5th, which this is actually the first time we see signs of distress in Maura.
Which I find super interesting. I find this super, super interesting.
Yes, this is part where this is an instance in this case where I'm like, I still don't understand the series of events in this.
No.
So usually, when she was working this security thing, she was just like sitting at a desk at the front of the hall, you know, making sure that people who were coming in or were supposed to be in there and everything like that. Julie said that she usually just did her schoolwork during the night when this happened. There were a number of phone calls though that occurred during this shift. The first two are from her boyfriend Bill. He called at 7:17 p.m. and they talked for about 20 minutes. He calls again at 9:56 p.m. and they talk for about 6 minutes. It is then at 10:10 p.m. that her sister Kathleen calls her and they speak for 28 minutes. Now, the information within this conversation with Kathleen did not come out at first. At first, it was not known what they had talked about. It came out later on that we find out that Kathleen was in rehab. Her husband, who you can very much tell Julie is not a fan of, picked Kathleen up from rehab, and their first stop after leaving rehab, he brought her to the liquor store, and she relapsed. Julie had stated that this was the way her husband had controlled her, and it was easier to control her when she was drinking, so that is why he did it. But this conversation with Maura and Kathleen was Kathleen calling Maura and talking about the fact that she had relapsed and everything that came along with that, how she relapsed, the story behind it, everything like that. This obviously upset Maura, but at this point she had continued working. So Bill ends up calling again at about 12:07 a.m. They speak for 7 minutes. And when Bill was asked about this, he said it was an average conversation. Nothing she said really stood out. He didn't really even realize that she was upset, like upset. But then around 1 a.m., so about an hour after this phone call with Bill, 45 minutes after this phone call with Bill, she somehow becomes completely no longer able to function, upset. She could no longer function. The security supervisor for her job ended up being called. Her name is Karen. She was called, she showed up, and the way she explains it is she finds Maura unresponsive. Now, her unresponsive is not like unconscious unresponsive. It's literally, she is not responding. Right. She is hysterical, not able to do anything, not able to follow commands. She's not unresponsive in that way. And the only thing that Maura would say is, my sister, in between like her muttered cries. She was just that's all she could say was my sister, which is interesting because, yes, inconsolable. Thank you. That's a perfect way to say it. It's interesting because of the timeline. She has this phone call. Now, if this would have happened right after the phone call with Kathleen, it would have made more sense.
Right.
But she talked to people in between who said she was fine. So no one's really sure what caused the sudden change in all of this. What are your thoughts?
I can't wrap my head around it. I cannot wrap my head around it to go from one extreme to another after time passes, after you're doing your job, after you're talking on the phone with someone else, to go from that extreme to another. And I would like to know, how long did it take for the supervisor to get on scene? Because if she was still like that once she arrived, and it was in the early morning hours, that means she was going for a while.
Yeah.
And she said that she had to walk her back to her dorm, right?
Yeah, so she ends up back. Yep, she ends up escorting her. She consoles her. So Karen, the supervisor, is very much like, something is very wrong. Like, I hope you're, like, consoling her, not just like, ugh, call someone else in. Like, supervisors I've had are like, ugh, if you don't get someone here to work for you, suck it up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if she like made a split decision that she wanted like off work and that was her way to get out.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's kind of always been my thoughts.
Well, especially because we hear then she escorted her back to her dorm and she was like, do you want me to come up with you and sit with you while you settle down? And Maura's like, no, I'll be okay. I have a roommate.
Right. Which she didn't.
Which she does not.
I agree with you, Shay. I think that too.
So,
especially which we'll find out, you know, what her, you know, future actions will be also aligns with wanting to get out of these situations. But why to the extreme? I don't know. Why? And I do take that as a factor in her where she was mentally, that if it was to get out of a situation, which I get, we've all been, you know, like, oh, I'm sick, can't come to work, you know, whatever. But to put on a performance, and I'm not saying necessarily it was a performance as if the emotion wasn't real, but to hype it up to get out of it, that makes me concerned with where her mental health could have been at.
Right. One thing too that I don't think is mentioned a lot of places is that the family has not seen, there was like, the way I describe it, just because the way I describe it is there's a landline for the security people who are working that she had access to. So there is the ability that she could have potentially been making calls or receiving calls on that phone line. And Julie makes it a point to say we've never been able to get those phone records. So if there was something else that had happened or someone called the line for actual, like, where she was working at Melville Hall versus like the like, you know what I mean, versus her cell phone,
right?
We don't know. Hi, big gal. So, like, there are still some unknowns that even the family at this point are like, I don't know if she potentially, between the time of her talking to Bill at what, midnight 7 or whatever, 12:07 to when she leaves at like 1:30 or whatever, like, we don't know if there was potentially a call in there.
But then why my sister? No other words understand but my sister.
That could potentially, though, bring back into what Shay was thinking of, that was just something that she had the potential to utilize in that moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Especially if maybe her colleagues or something, they were aware that she
had that,
you know.
Yeah.
Or she was using it as an excuse because they had heard her talk about her sister earlier.
And wasn't there like a later excuse about a funeral or something?
That is what she ends up, telling the actual school. So, like, her professors, she says there was a death in the family. I'm going to be leaving. I won't be in class for the next week, is what she ends up telling her professors.
So she's willing to lie to get out. And what all it tells me is that within this short time frame, not only are we dealing with a very suspicious disappearance, but it's the events leading up that is very peculiar, and it sets in this mindset. But that's why I appreciate, because it's very important that Mallory took the time to go all the way back, because again, if we just looked at a few days prior into, I would feel one way, but then you have to understand who she is overall as a person, you know, leading up to it. And that's what I think I struggle with, is that it's just very far ends of the spectrum, the behavior versus who we know she is, you know, how her family describes her, and what would have caused, was something going on that caused her a sudden break of this behavior and feeling the need to abandon work and school, and but for what?
Right. She hasn't like, yes, she's shown different behaviors of fight or flight or something like that. But to the extent of like packing up and driving by herself and not telling anyone where she was going, it never hit that mark to this point.
So, just something to point out, and it's not saying this is the case with Maura, but I have like listened to a few different psychologists kind of talk through in general how it's hard for like the college age kids to kind of see and determine really what behavioral changes there are, because that's also a prime age where some yeah, you know what I'm going with, some with like a more of a disorder, personality behavioral disorder per se, may come to light and be more prevalent. And I'm not saying this is her, but like I could see where this is like really difficult.
Well, and bringing that up, not saying anything about Maura, but like schizophrenia, stuff like that can have its first show of symptoms in your late 20s. So it's a common time frame as your onset of symptoms to happen in your late 20s. Does that always happen? Absolutely not. Does that mean that that's what happened to Maura? Absolutely not. But because of the time frame and how everything has worked out, it's definitely something that should at least have been considered when looking into it. But at the same time, that's something that you need to go to a specific person over time that specifically has to look at Maura, because even looking at it, having my degree in psychology, I can't diagnose her with anything, even though I see red flags reading it, because I have not met her. I have not gotten to talk to her or do this. I'm only looking from the outside. So it
and not from her perspective, from others.
Yes. Yeah.
I kind of see that being a common theme that gets brought up when there are disappearances around this age group, and doesn't mean any of them have it or of the sort, but I think that they should consider any and all options and maybe, think through that. This just breaks my heart.
Yeah, I think it's good just to keep it known that statistics, show this. Doesn't necessarily mean it correlates to Maura's disappearance, but it's good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see.
And that's true, Loki. Intense programs also put immense pressure on healthy psyches. And and I take that as a factor too of just kind of what I was saying before of all-star athlete breaking records. That's a lot of pressure also. That's a lot of pressure. And no, I don't necessarily think stealing the eyeliner was let me get out of this. But what if she didn't want to continue this route? And that feeling of letting down your family, right? This pressure of always beating the records and being the all-star, following in your mother's footsteps, the nursing school. What if you couldn't do that anymore, and that immense amount of pressure to keep going, and maybe you can't keep going? Maybe you don't want to keep going.
Yeah.
But she didn't want to be perfect anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe. I'm not saying that for sure. I'm just saying maybe she didn't want to be perfect anymore.
Yeah. I think anything's a possibility. But we also will go back to no one knew obviously what upset her, like we were saying. They did not have the dorm phone records. But one thing that they did know, something had to have happened to a certain extent, because that night she was making a lot of calls to her local pizza joint for, once again, a large amount of food. So we saw this before when she found the friends, or not the friends, the person in the dorm's credit card, and she ordered a ton of food. This night she ends up doing that as well. Julie in the podcast does go on to talk about that she's convinced that at that time Maura was feeling a loss of control, and that is why she went into a binge eating type of situation and ordering all the food and taking it in. And that could also potentially put into kind of Shay's thought process of, did she continue to think about what happened with Kathleen, potentially make up because it wasn't that she wasn't feeling anything, it was she needed to go take care of what she needed to take care of.
That impulse and
Yes. And so she was doing whatever she could to get out of that situation to go take care of the other situation.
Yeah. I think that's a great theory, possibility.
Yeah.
And it's like a short-term solution that secures what you're trying to obtain.
Makes her feel comfortable in that second to stop whatever is the panic happening at that time.
And it's not, even though it's something as simple as you want to order 8 pizzas to your job, freaking go for it. But we live in a different time now. And so it's that feeling of secrecy and shame, and I got to go back. I got to be alone to do this. Right. And maybe it was all of those emotions that, from what her sister said, that she was struggling with, but she could not do that publicly. She could not do that in the setting that she was in. She needed to handle that privately in the setting she was used to.
Yeah, and also just one part I want to point out too is we also have to look at the time frame of this. This is 2004. Ordering 8 pizzas is not going to cost anywhere near what it is now. If I were to go order 8 pizzas, I'm spending freaking $500 today in today's time. Yep. So 8 pizzas, where it's like, to me, I'd be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But back then, it was nowhere near as expensive. So it could be like, oh, she spent $100 on pizza, which would have been excessive during that time frame. Also for like 8 pizzas for one person still. But like, just that's an aspect of this that I was like, okay. Because at first I'm like, holy, how is no one talking about that she spent $500 on pizza? And I'm like, well, wait, it wouldn't have been $500 back then.
And I thought the same thing, which, when circling back around to when Maura got into the accident, the dad, and this is what I meant by half glass full type of guy, he never yelled, like, this is what Julie explains. He never yelled at them, like, never got on them. And the way he said that Maura was so ashamed and upset and distraught over it. And he said, listen, it's $500 worth of work. Oh, at least you're okay. At least you're safe. Yep. At least this. And in my mind, I was like, wait a second, because Julie explained the car had significant damage. And then I hear the dad say $500 worth. I'm like, has it really? Inflation just like, because that's not, $500 is,
it was his deductible
to get tires, like,
yeah, it was his deductible.
Wow. Yeah.
But still. So one other thing I do want to mention, which Julie made it very clear that this is an aspect, a rumor that has come hand in hand with Maura's case, that in Julie's perspective is very harmful, and she does not believe it has anything to do with Maura, and that the insinuation of Maura having something to do with this is doing more harm than good, and is one of the rumors that she wants squashed and not connected with this case. Which is the
there's
fact,
no proof whatsoever, none.
Correct. Yes. So on this night, so the night that we're speaking of, with the phone calls, with her leaving early, on a separate part of campus, near the Amherst Center, at about 12:20 a.m. So it would have been about an hour before she had her mental breakdown. She was still at work. There was a hit and run incident, with a victim named, do you guys know how to say his name? Patri Vasi, I believe. So a lot of people have thrown the rumor out there that Maura could have potentially been involved, or that someone that she knew was involved and had called her and told her, and that's what got her so upset, and then utilized it. And Julie on the podcast was very, very adamant to say, trying to tie my sister to a felony like this when there's not an ounce of evidence tying her to this, just because of the time frame in the area, is wrong, and it is misinformation being spread. And she said it's mostly happening online, but it is not an accurate connection. So
Well, and I will say, not saying that they'd be willy-nilly as far as admitting it if they did find out, but I also found that the family seemed very forthcoming as far as things that Maura, things that may have shined Maura not in the best light, being aware of the alcohol and the driving and the numerous accidents and this. It seemed like they genuinely did an investigation, and if they even found that it led down that road, it seemed like they would fully acknowledge it just to once again figure out what happened, where is Maura. And if that was a piece of it, I believe, based on how I perceived that podcast, they would acknowledge it if they even thought that there was any validity in it.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so now we're gonna get to Friday, February 6th. Was pretty uneventful. There was a snowstorm. Classes were canceled at UMass Amherst. But nothing really happened. Julie believes that Maura probably slept off the day. Whatever. And she was set to work Sunday nights at the art gallery. So that was Friday. So I already skipped, sorry. Saturday, February 7th is now here. This is the day that Maura's dad is in town. They're going to buy a new car for Maura since the Saturn has been, shooting out the black smoke. The cylinders were cracked or blown or whatever verbiage they use. I'm not a car person. But he makes it down there Saturday, February 7th. He makes it a point to say Maura did not mention her breakdown from the night before. And that during the day, him and Maura went to a bunch of different used car lots. They went to a few in the cities next over. Then Maura's boyfriend Bill had then told him about where he got his car, so they went there. They ended up finding two different cars that Maura really liked. One was like $6,000, one was like $7,000. Now remember, he did not have that much money, so he needed to find a way to figure out how to get this money before he left. But at that point, they were like, we've been looking all day. We'll come back tomorrow. And they tell the guy, we don't have enough money on us right now, but we will be back tomorrow to pick whichever car it was. That was obviously still there and that they could afford at that time. At about 3:21 p.m., Maura actually calls Julie to tell her about the car that they found, really excited about it. Like, we found this car. I love it. It's this, this, and that, giving all the details of it. And then at 4:13, she makes a call to Reliance Auto. Don't know why, unless it was just that they were planning on, when she picked up the car, bringing it to an auto place to double check everything or something, And then that's when they're like, we're done for the day. Let's go get some dinner and some drinks and just relax. We have all day tomorrow to finish getting the car. At that time, they went to the Amherst Brewing Company for dinner and drinks. And her friend Kate, that we had previously talked about, had texted her on her way home from a track meet, and she invited her to the brewing company to meet her and her dad for dinner. Julie had said they all loved when their dad came to town because not only was he fun to hang out with, but he paid for everything. So they would always invite their friends and they'd all hang out, and then their dad would pay for everything. So she invited Kate. Kate showed up at the brewing place. They all had dinner and drinks together. And then after dinner, Maura mentioned to her father that there was going to be a party at the dorms that night and that they were going to go after dinner. So they were wondering if on the way home he could, or on the way back to the dorms, could they stop at the liquor store altogether? And so I know that there was a lot of back and forth regarding age because she was potentially underage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to say she was not quite 21. so there was a lot of back and forth between the dad, whether the dad went in and bought them the alcohol, or if he stayed in the car and they utilized fake IDs to get the alcohol. He could not remember if he was in the store according to the different, or like in any of like the published stories, it was not specified whether he went in with them or not. But regardless, they got alcohol. This is when she actually ends up buying the box of red wine that ends up in the car after she goes missing. And then after that, Maura had asked her dad if they could borrow the car for the night. They'd go drop him off at his motel he was staying at and then take the car with them.
She was 21, maybe 22, depending on, but she was for sure 21 because she was born in 1982.
Yeah.
And so she had to be old enough to drink.
Okay, so then it would have been, then the question would have just been that whether or not her dad went in with them was the question being thrown around, because he was saying, no, I didn't go in there, but then he was saying things like, well, when we were in there, we were trying to figure things out, not in like a sketchy way, just in like a memory way. And so they said, can we just borrow your car? We'll drop you off and then we can take this back to the party or whatever. And he was like, sure. He happened to be staying at the Quality Inn in Hadley. And other than that, the party was very much a mystery. Until this day, it's still very much a mystery. Surprisingly, this party was actually hosted by Sarah, which is the friend of Maura's that is from the art gallery that has refused to talk to anyone, including the family, regarding this case. And at this time, even the few times that she said at the very beginning after this happened, when like Maura's dad would ask her and be like, who was at the party? What was the party? She would literally just say, I was asleep. She wouldn't answer any questions, even though she was hosting this party. Yeah.
And keep in mind, remember I told you guys, remember this dorm room size, max like 8 people comfortably sitting. But how are you sleeping when there are people in your dorm room?
Yeah. Well, right. And why are you having people over if you'd rather just be sleeping?
Mm-hmm.
At that point, that's when all your shit gets stolen or broken, if you're not paying attention to what's going on in your own room.
And why is it such a secret? Like, I mean, I mean, why does it seem so secretive, you know?
Well, and the other interesting part about it, though, is that her friend Kate obviously went with her to this party.
Mm-hmm.
And Kate talks about the party, and this is the only thing that she says. She says she doesn't really remember most of it. They were drinking. But that there was only about 7 to 8 people there. It was not this big blow up party that everyone was saying it was when she like first disappeared. They're like, it's a huge party on campus. It was crazy. But no, it was like 7 to 8 people. They were all drinking, just chilling and having a good time in dorm room, in the size of a dorm room that Melissa showed on the pictures. But not only that, she didn't really know anyone that was there. Neither did Maura really. She said it was very common to just be invited by one person, not know anyone else there, and you get to know them, which is what you do in college. And so other than that, even Kate really didn't have a ton of information. She's like, nothing really happened. Like, we hung out, we drank, and then Kate said that she had made it home between 1 and 2 a.m. We later find out, I think, just based on like police reports and stuff, or not police reports, because they haven't actually released a ton of stuff, but according to what the family has been told by police, both Maura and Kate leave the party at 2 a.m. And instead of walking like Kate, she got in her dad's car. So at this point, though, it was interesting because Kate doesn't really remember this night. She's very open about that. She said she remembers her saying something like, I need to bring the car back to my dad's motel. But then she also remembers seeing her walk up to the dorm room, and like they live on separate floors. So she's like, I just saw her leave and I was like, okay, I'll catch up with you tomorrow or something like that. So there's a lot of different recollections of what occurred at this night. but I think a lot of it has to do with the drinking. I don't think everyone remembers what's happening. I don't think it's necessarily something nefarious. I think everyone just doesn't remember because they all just got shit-faced and made bad decisions. In my opinion. But, hi, Jonesin. So, what do you guys think, though, about that? What are your thoughts on up to this point so far? Because I'm going to get to the accident here, and then we'll end it out.
At first I thought that, you know, it would make sense if she didn't really want to talk because the party was like in her room. But given how much time has gone by, you know, like take that out of the equation, I guess it's just weird. Or what if, because she doesn't really recall much, she was advised by maybe her parents or somebody that she respected to not speak on it if she doesn't, you know, really recollect much.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The thing that bothers me is it's 20 years later and she still won't talk.
Yeah.
Like, why?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's also a difference too in the fact that it's like she could also just be like, nothing happened. We were all just super drunk, or we were doing something else. Like Deet said, almost sounds like they were given something stronger or doing something stronger and just didn't want to admit to it. I mean, it's college in the early 2000s. Like, I'm assuming, because like this will point out I was a child, but that shit like that happens. And so what if she's also just potentially thinking like, nothing that happened at this party has anything to do with this, and if I start talking, it's going to bring more light onto the things that we were doing that night that have nothing to do with Maura.
But you're 40 now. Who cares?
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I'm just like
right.
playing devil's advocate.
I get it. I get what you're saying. I just think of me like all the dumb, stupid things we did in college now. Why? It doesn't matter. It's a lifetime ago.
Well, yeah, it's the same thing as like nowadays I can have a conversation with like my mom or my dad and tell them something I did back in high school that I would have been grounded forever for, putting like shipped off somewhere for, and now I'm like, haha, you didn't catch me, and we can like laugh about it even though it was a bad thing. You know, my parents have told me things that they've done during their time frame when they were in that age. Like I definitely get what you're saying as like the 20 years, but I think it's because also there is also the potential that Maura's case is still open. She is still missing. There's still no answer to that. So even though it's 20 years later, technically the circumstances haven't changed to a certain extent.
Right.
But I don't know. Okay.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Go ahead, and if someone wanted to say something quick. So now we're going to get into the accident. So at 3:30 a.m., Maura crashes her dad's car. It's interesting. That's what I have up here on the screen. So we'll scroll through this quickly so that I can get to like the little drawing of it. But this happens on campus. And let's just go here. You guys can see here, this is what happens. She's here on North Hadley Road. She's driving, and instead she comes to a T stop. And instead of taking a left or a right, she just goes straight into the guardrail snowbank. That's it. No turning, no nothing. She just crashes straight into the guardrail, going straight. Now, I will say here, based on, it says the crash narrative, vehicle number 1 was traveling westbound on North Hadley Road near the intersection of North Maple Street. Due to operator inattention, she went through the T intersection and struck the snowbank and guardrail at the opposite side of the T intersection. And then it said College Street Motors towed the vehicle and gave the operator a ride to Quality Inn Motel. So the main reason I wanted to bring this up is just so you guys could see the drawing here to kind of show exactly what occurred. Okay. So, now Maura had left her cell phone in her dorm. So she did not have a way to contact anyone after this accident. Supposedly, a random UMass cadet, like security cadet, happened upon the scene and called police. Okay? And then the responding officer gets there. The responding officer does not administer any sobriety tests, nor did the officer call for EMS. All the officer did was write the report and then called for the tow truck. Now, it is noted, one of you guys mentioned it before, there is heavy, heavy damage, I think it was Melissa, damage on this car. It was not like a, oops, I bumped into the guardrail. It was totaled car type of damage.
Like $8,000 back then.
Was this the dad's brittle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but there are a lot of questions. I believe the police officer also said that she slid on snow or debris to potentially hit it, which doesn't make sense because even with the drawing, it's not like she slid the side into it. She hit straight on. So I don't know exactly. Well, number one, not doing a sobriety test was the biggest mistake, but still. She claims she was not drunk.
Did you say if she ever came to a stop?
I don't know if it's stated. I don't know if they know.
Because that would make, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. If she didn't stop and she just kept going and then hit it.
Yeah, like got distracted.
She didn't realize that she missed the stop sign.
Yeah.
Didn't turn. Yeah, that makes sense.
I didn't know if there were eyewitnesses on that one.
Oh, no, there was not.
Okay.
It was literally 3:30 in the morning. So, but I know her family very much questions whether or not this accident gave Maura head trauma that potentially could have played a role in what happens after. Do you have any thoughts, Melissa?
I don't think head trauma.
Okay.
I'm mad that the field sobriety test was never performed or anything like that. I'm interested. Where was she going? Why did she get in that car? Why did she drive? The amount of accidents that there are, and now that I know that she didn't even have her license. This is reckless behavior.
Yeah.
And yet every time she's caught, she seems so apologetic and genuine and not trying to be manipulative and sly about it, which makes me more confused.
Right.
What were you doing? And I can't. Why'd she get in the car again? Why was she driving? It was heading in the direction of the dad's motel. Yep. But what would be the purpose of that? I have so many questions.
Yeah. And I think the thing is too is that she potentially said something to Kate before they split after the party about going back to the motel, but Kate can't remember exactly what was said or anything like that. So it's like no one actually knows except for once this accident occurs, they end up calling the tow truck. She has the car towed to a lot across from the Quality Inn, and then she goes to the motel where her dad is. Now, she does not have a key to his room, so she ends up just sitting in the lobby, half falling asleep, half just waiting until the manager at the hotel just lets her into his room. And then she ends up just going to sleep, doesn't even wake up to tell her that she's there. He doesn't even know she's coming back. And she just sleeps. But it makes you wonder, why at that point, which I will say Julie comes up with a handful of, potentials of what she could have been thinking. Did she not want to have him wait for his car in the next morning or something like that, but didn't want to wait for a ride? But it still comes into the fact that she was going to have to go pick up her dad in the morning anyways. because they were going to go finish looking for the car. So it's not like she had class or he had somewhere to be. They had plans together the next day. So you're right. It doesn't make sense. So let's see. Tow truck tows it to a car lot near the motel.
So that was that odd route to the hotel? Do we know for sure? Okay.
Yeah. But it was still technically like on campus almost. So it's not like she got far at all. And she didn't have her phone. So, and I don't know
why.
if she left it in the dorm.
We left it.
I remember that, but I'm just saying why. That's weird, you know?
Yeah. And plus this took place, like I said, at 3:30 a.m., which is over an hour from when her and Kate split up. So for an hour, she was doing something before she actually started driving anywhere, which is interesting in itself. So let's see. Maura didn't have a key. So at 5:30 a.m., now the accident happens at 3:30 a.m. She sleeps in like the waiting room, sleeps in the lobby till the manager lets him in her dad's room. Then she goes to sleep again. 5:30 a.m., using her dad's cell phone, she ends up crying or calling her boyfriend Bill, super upset, super crying, like upset about this car accident, that she just ruined her dad's new car or whatever. After that call, her dad wakes up and Maura ends up telling her dad about the accident. Now, this goes back to what Melissa was saying of, you know, he never yelled at them. And he recalls this on the podcast. Her dad talks about it. And he's like, you know, Maura was very, very distressed. No matter what I told her, she was distressed. She just kept apologizing and, you know, beating herself up over this and everything. And he kept being like, it's okay, it's okay. You know, and then he's like, at first we were kind of stressed because I didn't know if Maura would be covered under my insurance for covering my car. But then they found out she was, and the deductible was only $500. So he was going to be able to get a new one for $500. So he's like, if the most you ever cost me in your life is $500, but you're safe, then we're cool. Like that's good. But
Glass
it didn't
half full type of guy.
The what?
Glass half full type of guy.
Right. And like Melissa had already explained, that's Julie remembers that's how he always has been. And he goes on to state, like, I don't have to yell at them. This is a perfect example of that. Maura is beating herself up more than anyone could for what happened. So it's like,
but that's the part that confuses me. She's beating herself up, and I believe that, yet continuously making poor
erratic behavior.
Yes.
Yeah.
Self-sabotaging.
Yeah. Right. It's like she's doing it, not thinking about the consequences, but then she actually feels the distress of the action after it's done, but not while it's being done.
That I think she had the impulsivity control.
Yeah.
Or to punish herself for some reason. Like, just, you know, maybe.
Yeah. Makes sense. So then that next morning after she talks to her dad, they figure out it's only $500. He obviously has to take the car. He gets a rental car and then drives that back because he has to figure out how he can get back to work. So it's a really important job that's going to make him a lot of money. Like, he can't stand them up. It's a new client. So he ends up checking out. Obviously, their plans changed because now they're down 2 cars. So he's like, we're just going to figure this out later. He checks out of the hotel and he goes and drops Maura off at her dorm. And this is actually the last time that Fred sees Maura. But as he's dropping her off, she is still very visibly upset. She is still sobbing. She is still apologizing. Even walking away from the car and up to her dorm, he can see her sobbing as she's walking up. even though now it's been, however many hours since she told him and done this and done, she's
and he's
still
reassuring her, right?
Yeah. Yes. And so even though she knows at this point she's not in trouble, all this stuff, like everything's going to be fine, she is still so visibly distraught that even he was like it's going to be fine. Like,
right.
So, and then at some point that day, she got her phone, which apparently maybe she left it at the party, and that's why, because she gets her phone back from Sarah. So that's why I wonder when they say left it in the dorm, if they meant Sarah's dorm and not her dorm.
Right.
Because at some point during that day, after she gets dropped off after the accident from her dad, she gets her phone back from Sarah, and she ends up talking to her dad at about 11:26 p.m., which is that following night. And the same type of thing. Still very upset. Her dad is reassuring her, like, everything's fine. It's $500. Like, you're safe. Everyone's safe. A car is a car. We have the money to get a new one. We're fine. She's still very emotional, visibly upset about everything. And that was the last time he actually spoke to Maura. So that would be the end of part 1 of this. So that's a lot of information.
More bizarre. Honestly, it only gets more and more bizarre from here.
It does. So on the bottom of the screen here, guys, I do have the phone number for the New Hampshire State Police Cold Case Unit that is in charge of Maura's case. If you have any information, please reach out to them. No tip is too small or unimportant or anything. Let them be the judges of that. The part 2 of this case, which then gets into the actual disappearance of Maura Murray, as well as the after effects and everything like that, will be on the wonderful Melissa Jade's channel on Thursday at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. I do have it linked in the description below. I believe it's the first link in the description is her actual link to that live. Oh, Will, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's very nice of you. Oh my gosh. You want to know the crazy thing?
What?
3 out of those 5 gifted memberships went to my mods.
Yay! That's not a bad thing.
Unbelievable. Thank you. Regardless, I love it. Thank you. But so yes, we will be over there on Thursday night. Thank you guys so much for coming up.
Mallory, you did an amazing job laying that all out. Like, honestly, like, you did superb.
This is why I only go live like twice a month, because if it doesn't look like this, I get anxiety.
You did flawlessly. Absolutely perfect. Superb.
Good. Then I won't bring up the fact that one of my militaries was spelled wrong, because I noticed it and I tried not to bring it up what was on screen.
Don't overstress yourself.
Oh, don't even. I put a comma in the wrong spot once. Ask my mods. They never let me live it down.
Oh, no.
They know how much it bothers me when I either do spelling errors or grammatical errors. And so I was like, please no one say anything. Please no one say anything. And then I'm like, I'll tell you guys, and you guys let me know if you can find it, because you can. I'm going to end up linking the presentation as well in the description. So if you guys want to go around and play and look at it just for yourselves, you guys can. If you guys find it, let me know. Yes, thank you again. All of the resources that I used, as well as links to the podcast, Media Pressure. It is produced by Sarah Turney, the sister of Alyssa Turney, and it is narrated by Julie Murray. And we will meet back up at Melissa's channel on Thursday to go over everything from this point to where we are now. So,
and I very much look forward to it. So thank you, Mallory, for having us on for part 1, and I can't wait to do part 2.
Thank you all. And if you think you have questions now, get ready.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So many more.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks guys. And just, I'm going to end it off. I'm going to just put the overlay on for a little bit, and then I will end it off. I just did a little overlay with the info for, hang on, it's going to cover us all, eating disorder resources. So here you guys go. Here's some phone numbers depending on where you are, as well as the website that also will help you get more specific information. So on there, you have the ability to like put in your specific zip code and find help in your specific area. If you or a loved one needs help, they also have it for like, if it is a loved one and you don't know how to handle helping, they have help for that as well. So yeah, thank you guys all for coming. Thank you to my wonderful panel guests. Yeah, thanks guys. Have a good night.
See you Thursday.
Good night.
Yes, see you guys Thursday.
Bye.
Bye guys. And just thank you guys again for coming. Thank you guys for listening to the first half of Maura's story. Getting to know her as a person. Maura Murray is not a case. She's a human. And although her case is kind of what has got us to know her, we are getting to get to know her through the podcast, through her sister, through her family. And I don't think that's something that we need to take for granted. One other thing I do want to just touch on quick. We are on Melissa's channel, which I'm honestly begging you guys to make sure that you guys catch part 2. Because the final episode on the podcast with Julie Murray goes over the impact that online true crime social media creators have on victims and their families, as well as the Engage with Empathy campaign, which is something that as soon as I listened to this podcast, it had the biggest impact. I remember I messaged MJ and I was just like, holy shit, you need to listen to this. Even if you can just listen to the final episode right now and then go back and listen, like, it's so impactful with hearing each of the family members talk about how even the national news coverage of Maura's case, all the way down to true crime creators on social media, the negative and the positive impacts of an actual victim's family that are still ongoing. But there's also part of the Engage with Empathy that we will get into on Melissa's channel goes into like, are you going to help on a case? When you're covering a case, is the information you're bringing up beneficial to the case? If not, then in Maura's family's, their perspective, then you're not helping the case. So I think it's, especially in the environment on these YouTube streets right now, it is something that definitely needs to be shared as much as possible. I did make a community post about it a few weeks ago when I was listening to the podcast that kind of just shares the overall of it. It is also on the family's page. So please look into that. We will get into it, like I said, on Melissa's live on Thursday. But it is something that really opened my eyes that I look at now constantly when I'm going to research a certain case to be like, is me covering this case beneficial? And if the answer is no, then I'm not going to cover it. I don't need the views. I don't need the money. I'm doing what I can while doing something I'm passionate about. So once again, guys, thank you guys for coming here. If you guys are in the line of the storms tonight, please stay safe. The weather's been crazy lately. And just be kind. Stay out of the bullshit on the YouTube streets. You're your own person. Do your own thing. Be kind to everyone. And most importantly, if you're on YouTube, be kind to the victims' families. They're who matter on here, not creators. So thank you guys. I will talk to you guys soon on Thursday on Melissa's. Once again, link down below. I'll share it as well on Thursday. Have a great night, guys. Thanks for being here. Bye.